I never planned to fall for my husband's son. But something happens when you've been unseen for too long. You start noticing anyone who actually looks at you. This isn't a story about seduction. It's about silence, about a woman who forgot she existed until someone noticed the way she held a coffee cup. If you've ever stayed in a marriage because it felt safer than leaving, this story may hit closer than you expect. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell, because the stories we try to avoid are often the ones we need most. Now, come with me to a quiet Thursday morning where everything looked normal, but nothing was. On a Thursday morning in mid-August, the world was enveloped in a thick silence. The air was not yet hot, but the promise of warmth lingered just beyond the horizon. The atmosphere hung heavy and languid, as if the very essence of the house had yet to stir from its slumber. Clad in my robe, the fabric bore a subtle coffee stain near the cuff, a quiet testament to my morning routine. The air in the kitchen was thick with the scent of overbrewed espresso mingling with the sharpness of lemon dish soap. A morning that seemed to hang in the air as if time itself was uncertain of its next move. Without a hint of forewarning, the front door swung open. Mark entered the room, a soft melody escaping his lips, a suitcase clutched in one hand and a reusable grocery bag in the other. I remained rooted in my spot by the sink. He pressed his lips to my forehead, as was his custom, gentle, unfocused, before casually remarking, "He'll be staying for a bit." I refrained from inquiring about his identity. I was not obliged to. Caleb trailed in the wake of the others. It had been 7, perhaps 8 years since our paths last crossed. In those days, he was awkward and uncertain, a collection of elbows and elongated limbs, embodying that adolescent weight in his stance, the sort that suggested his bones were still finding their rightful place. At this moment, he stood taller, broader. His jaw bore a sharpness defined and darkened by a shadow that seemed to have materialized from nowhere. His presence seemed anything but coincidental. It was as if intentional, calculated. His eyes, while not striking in hue, possessed a certain stillness that captivated the moment, as if he were perpetually observing, silently gauging the atmosphere of a space before crossing its threshold. "Elaine," he uttered. It had been years since I had last heard him utter those words. Neither mom nor stepmom, simply my name. As if I were a fleeting memory, a figure from his past, whose presence now lingered in uncertainty. "Caleb," I responded. I made an effort to smile. "I believe I have." He offered a slight nod, almost imperceptible, before slipping past me in the hallway, his bag in tow. The wheels glided softly, leaving a gentle dragging sound in their wake upon the floorboards. I allowed my hand to linger on the edge of the counter, a fleeting reminder of my corporeal existence. Mark was in the midst of unpacking groceries, casually discussing the dreadful traffic on I-76, as if the atmosphere remained unchanged. Yet I sensed it deeply. The instant Caleb stepped over that threshold, the house had transformed. Not in any discernible manner. The furniture remained undisturbed. The light continued to slant across the breakfast nook as it had always done. Yet the atmosphere carried a distinct heaviness now, as if a subtle shift had occurred within me, a mere half-inch to the left, and in that instant, everything lost its harmony. As the evening settled and the soft click of Caleb's door echoed gently down the hall, I found myself attuned to the monotonous cadence of footsteps overhead, the groan of aged timber, and the soft murmur of the television in the guest room. Nothing particularly dramatic, only existence, merely a testament to his presence in this moment. Mark remained reticent regarding the reasons behind Caleb's arrival. I was aware of the tension that had lingered. Fatherhood was a garment that never quite fit Mark, always hanging awkwardly on his frame. He was a man of virtue, dependable, steady, faithful, yet closed off. Do not ever unveil. In my experience, that had proven effective, at least for a time. We found ourselves in a state of stability, unwavering and constant. A certain steadiness that occasionally resembled the sensation of being overlooked, even when right before their eyes. At a certain juncture in our union, affection had transformed into a seamless ritual. Invoices settled, meals, prepared, anniversaries acknowledged. Yet an essential essence, one that caused the skin to recall its purpose, had subtly faded into the background. I failed to perceive its departure. It was only in its absence that I became aware of its presence. And now, Mark's son, the child who once lingered quietly at our table, scarcely grazing his meal, had returned. Yet he had shed the remnants of boyhood. He sat with a confidence that belied any uncertainty about his position. He navigated the house as if his memories painted a different picture than ours. That evening, I found myself in the bathroom, toothbrush in hand, gazing intently at my own reflection. The fabric of my robe slipped ever so slightly from my shoulder. I secured it firmly, not due to the chill that enveloped me. Yet I found myself pondering the last time I felt the possibility of being truly seen, and that, I believe, was the moment when everything subtly started to shift. Caleb made himself comfortable in the guest room tucked away at the end of the hallway. The door remained largely shut, yet not entirely so. At times, it stood just a fraction open, reminiscent of an idea lingering in the air, yearning for completion. I made an effort to ignore the frequency with which I traversed that hallway. The guest room lingered in the shadows, a mere whisper of an idea never fully realized. A sanctuary of stillness, a chamber adorned with an array of eclectic linens and an antique dresser, its drawer resistant to movement. Yet with Caleb's arrival, it assumed a new significance. It was filled with a presence that made the atmosphere feel scrutinized. On that initial night, the bed springs emitted a creak, feet shuffled across the aged wooden floor, and a soft thud resonated as a suitcase was unzipped. The sound that filled the air was not one of arrival. It was the echo of a beginning once more. The following morning, I entered the kitchen and paused, momentarily losing sight of my purpose for being there. He stood by the sink, bare-chested, quenching his thirst directly from the faucet. The dawn's glow sliced through the air, illuminating the contours of his physique with a vivid precision. His skin shimmered subtly, as if he had just stepped in from the sweltering heat, despite the air conditioning having run throughout the night. He pivoted with deliberate slowness, neither surprised nor alarmed, but fully conscious of his surroundings. "I apologize," he remarked. His voice resonated with a depth I had long forgotten, unwavering. He brushed his mouth with the back of his hand. "I never intended to obstruct your path." I shook my head and mustered a smile. "Do you still prefer your coffee black?" I inquired. His eyebrows arched ever so slightly. Then he offered a slight lopsided grin. "Indeed," he replied. I filled a cup and offered it to him. Our fingers remained apart, yet the connection felt palpable. A silence lingered between us, not uncomfortable, but inviting. Silence. It was as if neither of us dared to articulate the unspoken truths, lingering in the silence. He grasped the cup and retreated a step. I pivoted toward the fridge, feigning a search for something, anything, merely to occupy the silence that hung around me. The memory of that moment lingered with me throughout the day. In due course, I observed him from behind the glass as he ventured out for a smoke. Neither a true smoker nor one with a cadence lacking the ritual that defines the habit. He held the cigarette loosely, as if uncertain of its purpose in his hand. He perched on the porch rail legs, dangling over the edge, shoulders, slumped eyes locked on an empty horizon. I observed the manner in which he struck the cigarette against the grain of the wood, at one moment, twice, then simply allow it to ignite and consume itself. It slipped my mind just how profoundly quiet he could become. Certain individuals exhibit fidgeting behaviors when they find themselves in uncomfortable situations. Caleb fell into silence. A memory surfaced from years past, a time when he was still in his teenage years. He had uttered my first name, not from a place of defiance, not from a place of disrespect, simply Elaine. It had taken me by surprise. As I sorted through the pantry, a soft melody escaped my lips, filling the air with a gentle hum. As he strolled by, he inquired if I needed assistance. No. He inclined his head and replied, "Very well, Elaine." It was remarkably diminutive, yet it lingered in my thoughts, a thread ensnared at the precipice of recollection. Mark was oblivious to such details. He had perpetually found himself occupied, concentrated, remote as men frequently are when they equate provision with genuine connection. In those formative years, I would trail behind him from one room to another, yearning to remain near. We shared a certain harmony, or at the very least, we rehearsed it well. A goodness that transcends words. Yet in time, our conversations faded into silence. We transformed into a cohesive entity, a ritual, a existence woven with reminders, calendars, and the gentle brush of polite kisses upon the cheek. The closeness slipped away so subtly that I couldn't even identify the moment I ceased to grasp his hand. With Caleb now residing in the house, the disparity grew increasingly difficult to overlook. He was silent indeed, yet observant. He observed the moment I shifted an item in the kitchen. He remarked on the fragrance of the candles I lit. He observed. And that stirred something within me. I began selecting various garments scattered throughout the house, unassuming, simply gentler, more engaged. A cotton dress that once adorned me before evenings of dining out. A silk blouse I had ceased to care about ironing. Each morning, I apply a hint of perfume. It is not meant for him. That is what I reassured myself at the very least. He started to accompany me in the kitchen during the late afternoons. Not in every instance. Not in a predictable manner. It was just sufficient for me to begin recognizing the pattern. At times he lent a hand in chopping vegetables. At times he would rest against the counter, observing with arms crossed, a faint smile playing on his lips at my words. On one particular afternoon, as he extended his hand to seize a knife from the drawer, I simultaneously moved to pull it open. His hand lightly grazed against mine. It was fleeting, yet neither of us wavered. His gaze met mine, not profoundly, not with great intensity, just sufficiently prolonged to render any pretense of ignorance utterly futile. I carried that moment within me throughout the day, akin to a small stone nestled in my pocket. Petite, weighty, perpetually present. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Mark found himself delayed. He dispatched a message indicating that he would be laboring into the evening ensnared in discussions with a vendor. I responded with a thumbs up, only to be struck by a wave of self-reproach for resorting to an emoji in my conversation with my husband. Caleb and I shared a meal, the air thick with unspoken words. The delicate sound of forks meeting ceramic resonated throughout the room. I filled 2 glasses with wine for us both. His expression was one of astonishment. I cast my gaze downward, a smile blossoming on my lips. He lifted the cup to his lips and took a sip. I observed the subtle motion of his throat as he swallowed. In that fleeting moment, a mere whisper of time, I found myself pondering the sensation of resting my hand in that very spot. Afterward, I tidied the table and made my way to the sink. He extended his assistance, silently. Once he had stepped onto the porch, I lingered behind my gaze fixed on the remnants of pasta simmering on the stove, as though it held the secrets I sought. Once more, the house fell into a serene silence. Yet it was not the sort of silence that brought tranquility, a silence that carries the weight of unseen movement. Gradually, unseen, and thus it had already begun. It is often said that many individuals find themselves enchanted by the allure of language, through whispered revelations, in moments that boldly declare their significance. Yet this, whatever it was, unfolded in quietude. The tale began in the dimly lit hallway. Our abode was slender, spacious, yet steeped in age. The hallways were designed to compel individuals to navigate sideways when they crossed paths. Each touch of fabric, each moment of closeness, seemed less a matter of chance and more a serendipitous meeting. We crossed paths 2 times that morning, once by the linen closet and once just outside the bathroom. On both occasions, our arms brushed against one another. Unadorned flesh, radiant skin. In both instances, silence enveloped us, leaving words unspoken. Neither of us hurried beyond what was necessary. The second time, I shifted a bit, as if I were about to speak. Caleb came to a halt. He cast a glance in my direction, not entirely merely enough to acknowledge my movement. I remained silent. He did not either. Yet a certain resonance lingered in that silence, reverberating throughout the day. Subsequently, I found myself in the laundry room, tending to the task of folding towels. His decision to follow caught me off guard. Yet he did. He refrained from inquiring. He made no offer. He leaned casually against the doorframe, arms crossed, observing as I meticulously folded the white cotton towels that had suddenly transformed into something significant. After a brief pause, he crossed the threshold. Acquired one. It has been folded. He never inquired about the method behind my actions. He folded in the same manner as I did. Divided into halves, then further into thirds. Effective. Silence. Once more our hands brushed against each other. Not in a direct manner, woven through the very threads. Yet the feeling was indistinguishable from that of flesh. He set the neatly folded towel next to mine, then yet another. We pressed on. Silence speaks volumes. Rhythmic movements in perfect harmony. The atmosphere in that room was dense, as if it had mastered the art of holding its breath. Subsequently, he departed ahead of the others. I lingered in that space, feigning the act of arranging the shelves. My hands quivered slightly, compelling me to grasp the shelf longer than necessary. That evening, I found myself in bed next to Mark. He had already succumbed to slumber. One arm stretched across his chest, reminiscent of a figure grasping for something elusive in a dreamlike state. The ceiling held my gaze, an expanse of stillness above me. I felt no remorse or yearning. Simply, silence reigns. His breath came in a calm, measured rhythm. He had always been a serene sleeper, Once that had offered me solace. At that moment, it resonated as a sound to which I felt I had no rightful connection. With my eyes shut, I attuned my ears to the sound of footsteps echoing down the hallway. Silence enveloped me, yet their resonance lingered within me. The following day unfolded with an intensity of heat that surpassed all anticipation, the sort of heat that descends from the heavens rather than emanating from the earth below. As Mark pushed the mower across the yard, a low grumble escaped his lips, a familiar complaint about the relentless jamming of the machine echoing in his mind. I prepared a refreshing batch of iced tea. I filled 2 glasses driven largely by routine. I took one outside for Mark. Without fully realizing it, I poured another drink and made my way to the side of the house where Caleb was seated on the low stone steps behind the shed. He lifted his gaze upon noticing my presence. She squinted slightly against the bright sunlight. I extended the glass to him. Our fingers brushed against one another. Not for long, not by chance. He grasped the glass, yet hesitated to take a sip immediately. Simply gazed upon me, not accompanied by a suggestion, not with anything unrefined, only existence, as if he had caught sight of me. It was as if he truly perceived my presence. I took my place beside him, neither near nor distant. The trees danced gently in the warm breeze, their edges softening and shimmering under the bright sun. At long last, he brought the cup to his lips and took a sip. I observed his lips graze the edge of the glass. As he returned it to me, I accepted it, and for a fleeting moment, an urge surged within me to place my lips upon the very spot he had touched. I did not, yet I pondered over it. As the night enveloped the house, I found myself wandering past the guest room. The door stood slightly open once more. A gentle radiance poured forth from his lamp. He perched on the edge of the bedshirt, clad head bowed absorbed in the flicker of his phone's screen. He kept his gaze fixed downward. I remained silent. Yet I lingered far longer than necessary, fixated on the narrow beam of light, the gentle arc of his shoulder, the silhouette of a man who had once been merely a boy traversing my home. I returned to my sanctuary and nestled into bed next to my husband. He turned and rolled in my direction, extended a hand toward my waist, caressed my skin. I allowed him to proceed by mere routine, yet an emptiness enveloped me. His hand radiated warmth. Known, it once held significance. Now it felt as though memory had reached out to caress me. I shifted my gaze to the window, observing the dance of the ceiling fan's reflection as it whirled gracefully. As dawn broke, my gaze fell upon Caleb's shirt, draped casually over the chair on the back porch, somewhat moist as if he had donned it for a moment before abandoning it in that spot. It was an unintentional act, a moment of serendipity that led me to grasp it. The fabric possessed a gentle softness imbued with the essence of wear. The fragrance of cedar soap mingled with the warmth of summer air. I grasped it for a duration that exceeded what was wise. With a gentle motion, it was folded and set upon the banister. That evening, I discovered him in the garage, absorbed in the delicate mechanics of a small radio. At first, he was oblivious to my presence. As he pivoted, his demeanor transformed not in shock, but in a different, more nuanced way. Such acknowledgement. I presented him with the shirt. "You omitted this," I remarked. He accepted it in silence. Once more, our fingers brushed against each other. He held on for a moment longer. I did not either. We grasped the fabric, our hands lingering for a heartbeat longer than required. In that moment, I released my grip. I stepped back into the house, my breath coming in measured, deliberate intervals. That night, slumber eluded me. I moved through the hallway with a hushed step. I sensed his movements as well. Echoes of footsteps. The door slowly creaked open. The gentle flow of water cascades a soothing symphony of nature's rhythm. The gentle click of a drawer coming to rest. The house lay in a state of wakefulness. Not quite. It lingered in a moment of stillness. The sky deepened into shadows enveloping the house and rendering it diminutive in the encroaching gloom. It began with a profound silence, the sort of quiet that seems almost eerie, even for a time-worn dwelling such as ours. The birds fell silent. The trees remained still, their silence profound. Then arrived the change in tension. The palpable tension that hangs in the atmosphere just before chaos erupts. The tempest descended upon the late afternoon, casting shadows and stirring the air with its fierce presence. Swift, challenging, without a hint of remorse. The wind lashed against the porch screens. The rain pounded against the wooden planks with the force of clenched fists. As I tended to the ferns outside, the initial drops began to descend from the sky. I dashed for shelter, my bare feet striking the ground, clutching the empty watering can as if it were a futile defense. He had taken his place on the porch. Caleb lingered just beyond the screen door, arms crossed, observing the tempest with an enigmatic calmness. I joined him, water cascading down my hair, adhering to my cheeks. Silence enveloped us. The rain thundered around us, a formidable barrier of sound, dense, unyielding, as if it were attempting to cleanse something from existence. I placed the watering can gently on the ground. My breath came in shallow pulls, not from running, but from the charged atmosphere that enveloped us as I stood beside him. At last, he found his voice. In the midst of storms, you would tend to the plants with unwavering dedication. I glanced at him, taken aback. Do you recall that? He inclined his head in agreement. You mentioned they preferred it that way, that it stirred a sense of wildness within them. A chuckle escaped my lips, gentle, taken aback by the resonance of it. I completely overlooked that I ever uttered those words. You spoke many words in those days. A moment of silence lingered in the air, light in weight, yet filled with curiosity. For the first time in days, I took a moment to truly observe him. Truly observed. Neither at the curve of his shoulder nor the tension in his jaw. Yet consider the individual who orchestrates it all. He was no longer the boy who had sat in silence during family dinners. He was not the mere specter that lingered in the periphery of our union. He had become a man, perhaps not entirely realized, yet undeniably there. What brings you back? I inquired. His gaze remained unwavering. I'm not sure, he replied. Perhaps I was curious to discover if anything had shifted. Has it? He inhaled deeply, unhurried. You appear more solitary than I anticipated. That brought me to a halt. A spark ignited within my heart. I declared the truth, slipping from my lips before I had a chance to reconsider. He averted his gaze, not from a sense of guilt, in deference. I never hated you, he declared, even when I pretended as though I truly did. I swallowed hard. I understand, I murmured. Yet I found myself at a loss for how to connect with you. You were not alone in this. Another prolonged silence lingered between us, not devoid but brimming, burdened by the weight of unspoken words expressions we once believed were beyond our reach. He cast his gaze upon me once more. This time it shall be extended. You continue to evoke the warmth of home, he murmured softly. I remained silent. I was unable to. The rain began to ease, not halted, merely gentler, as if the sky had finally exhausted itself after a fit of rage. We lingered in that moment until the silence enveloping us became unbearable once more. I pivoted and stepped through the doorway. My hands quivered with an unsteady pulse. The tempest had subsided, yet an unsettling force lingered, refusing to find its calm. As the evening wore on, I found myself once more in the laundry room, folding, caressing the fabric rather than experiencing it. The sound of the door creaking open reached my ears. I could sense his presence without even glancing in his direction. He advanced with measured intent. It stirred within me long before it came into view. He extended his hand beyond me, not in search of an object, merely to feel the closeness. Our fingers grazed the surface of a towel. This time we remained steadfast, neither of us retreating from our place. The fabric fell away, creating a chasm between us. I pivoted to meet his gaze. His gaze was already fixed upon me, serene, unwavering. The only sound that filled the air was the soft, persistent hum of the dryer. I was uncertain about who made the initial move, yet I was aware that we both permitted it. His lips met mine, as if they had been anticipating this moment, not with desire, not with passion, but with a sense of understanding. It was a kiss, devoid of words, unhurried, cozy, incorrect, yet grounding. It made no demands. It offered no assurances. It simply existed, until we listened closely. The faint echo of a car door closing reverberates in the air. Mark. Our separation came too swiftly. I took a step back, colliding with the washer that loomed behind me. He stepped back, arms relaxed at his sides, expression inscrutable. I smoothed the fabric of my blouse. I gently smoothed my hair. I feigned indifference, masking the thrum of my heartbeat that echoed in my throat. Silence enveloped us, a heavy blanket of unspoken words. There was no necessity for it. The moment had come and gone, and it was a decision that could not be undone. We lingered in that space, two souls who had crossed a line enveloped by the scent of detergent, mingling with the warmth of the air. And then he departed, without the theatrics, without any regret, merely a subtle departure. I lingered meticulously, refolding the same towel not once, but twice. From above, the sound of Mark's footsteps reached my ears. The heavy thud of the front door echoed through the silence. The burden of a life I had carried for more than 2 decades settling back into its familiar position. Yet everything had become extraordinary. The tempest had subsided, and I found myself no longer within the confines of that familiar house. Guilt often whispers softly. At times, it resonates gentle and unwavering, akin to a device operating in a distant chamber. That morning, I navigated the kitchen as if I were a visitor in my own home. The chill of the floor seeped into my bones. The cabinets appeared to take on a hue of beige that was more pronounced than before. I lingered by the window, feigning interest in the garden beyond. Yet in truth, I found myself gazing at my own reflection in the glass. I appeared unchanged. The same gentle robe, a familiar silver streak by my temple, left untouched by dye. Yet an undeniable change had taken root within. There was a subtle shift in the arrangement. I could hear Mark above me shuffling through papers, the sharp click of a pen punctuating the silence. On that particular day, he found himself at home, immersed in the world of spreadsheets and lengthy conference calls, navigating the complexities of remote work. He drifted past the kitchen, pressed a gentle kiss to my head, and ascended once more, oblivious to the fact that I remained turned away, offering no greeting in return. He made no inquiry about my whereabouts the day prior. He made no inquiry about the weariness reflected in my eyes, or the fact that I had meticulously folded the same towels on 2 separate occasions. Mark had always possessed an unwavering trust in others. Perhaps simply occupied, he held a steadfast belief in the importance of structure. If all appeared well on the surface, it likely was. He adored me. I have no reason to question that. Yet it had been years since he last laid eyes on me. Such a form of blindness is acquired, refined, selected. As the day wore on, I approached the closet in our bedroom, searching for a scarf that I believed had slipped from my grasp. Instead, I stumbled upon an old shirt that Mark had gifted me for our anniversary, a gentle hue of blue reminiscent of the sky on a clear day. Silken threads weave a tale of elegance, somewhat oversized yet pleasantly soft in all the right places. I raised it to the light. Once it carried an air of romance. At that moment, it seemed like a recollection that belonged to another soul. I held it close to my heart for a moment, then gently set it down once more. I held back my tears. I remained utterly still, my eyes unflinching. I carefully folded the shirt and placed it back on the shelf as though I were returning it to a version of myself that had long since faded away. At the stroke of noon, I made my way to the farmer's market. Garlic was a necessity for me, or perhaps that was merely the pretext. I meandered through the stalls, my mind adrift and unfocused. I gathered fruit that was unnecessary. I encountered scents of candles that failed to entice me. I lingered for an eternity before a booth showcasing exquisite handmade soaps. It was in that moment that I first heard my name spoken. Elaine. I pivoted. It was indeed Marianne, a woman I had not laid eyes on for more than a year. Once a month, we would gather for lunch, a cherished ritual before life led us down different paths. We embraced. Her scent was a delightful blend of citrus and a hint of floral notes. "You look wonderful," she remarked, tranquil. A smile graced my lips, expressed gratitude. We engaged in light conversation. The atmosphere outside is a canvas painted with the hues of the sky, where clouds dance and sunlight weaves its golden threads. Each breeze carries whispers of change, inviting us to pause and reflect on the ever-shifting tapestry of nature's moods. Concerning an individual we both were acquainted with who had relocated to Florida. Then she inquired, "Are you happy?" The inquiry lingered softly in the air, not yet loaded, merely straightforward. And I deceived. "Indeed," I replied. Yet my gaze failed to align with the expression of the word. She lingered in my gaze just a heartbeat longer than what manners would dictate. He then nodded. "Excellent." We parted ways enveloped in yet another embrace. She pivoted her gaze toward the tomatoes. I strolled toward the parking lot. For what felt like an eternity, I lingered in the car, the engine silent and still, before finally deciding to ignite its roar. That evening, following dinner, the atmosphere in the house seemed denser than normal. Not more boisterous, simply more substantial. Mark found himself once more in the confines of the upstairs, immersed in a sea of emails, crafting half-hearted responses to those of questionable significance. With bare feet, I ventured into the backyard, embracing the world beyond the threshold. The grass retained a lingering dampness from the recent rain. The chairs possessed a certain chilliness. I found myself seated within one, enveloped myself in a cozy throw blanket, draping it around my shoulders. The evening breeze carried the scent of freshly mown grass and the lingering warmth of the day. Moments later, the sound of the door creaking open reached my ears from behind. Caleb. Silence enveloped him, his lips sealed tight, offering no words to break the stillness. Having just traversed the yard, they settled down beside me. Keep your distance. Just a short distance away, we gazed forward, heading into the void of the unknown. Silence enveloped us, yet the stillness that enveloped us radiated a comforting warmth, truthful, the essence of silence when it no longer conceals its truths. He inhaled deeply, savoring the moment, letting go of breath, then spoke. This house exudes the atmosphere of a waiting room. I tilted my head, ever so slightly, a space of anticipation. He inclined his head in acknowledgement. Indeed, it feels as though everyone in this place is simply biding their time, anticipating a shift in the air. Yet it remains unspoken. I chose not to reply, for he was indeed correct. That was precisely what it had transformed into. A realm where habits thrived, where memories lingered in corners delicate and ethereal like cobwebs, where comfort enveloped emptiness like a gentle embrace of a soft rug. I cast my gaze upon him then. Bathed in the gentle glow emanating from the house, his face appeared wearier than I had previously observed. Not weary, merely accustomed to shouldering burdens solo. We remained untouched. Yet his presence was palpable to me. The burden of his presence, the essence of his being. And I understood whatever boundary had been breached, it transcended mere longing. It revolved around acknowledgement, on the journey towards recognition. The envelope bore a simple exterior, unnamed, no stamp available. Thick, cream-colored paper slipped quietly beneath the front door, arriving sometime between the ritual of morning coffee and the distant rumble of the garbage truck passing by. It caught my attention as I was sweeping. It was out of place. It found no place to call home. I lifted it cautiously, as one would handle an object that could potentially sting. Within lies a solitary image, unclear, yet not excessively indistinct. It depicted me passing Caleb something on the back porch. A towel neatly folded, perhaps, or perhaps a glass. Yet it was not that which caused my stomach to churn. It was the touch of our hands. Their proximity was striking. How our fingers nearly brushed against one another. It was the gaze we shared, secured, concentrated. The photograph lacked any overt signs of romance. It failed to demonstrate anything of significance, yet it was aware. It uncovered a secret we believed was safely concealed. I settled onto the steps, gazed intently at the image. The rhythm of my heartbeat drowned out the howling wind beyond the walls. At that moment, the sound of the back door creaking open reached my ears. Caleb. I remained still. As he crossed the threshold, his gaze fell upon me, clutching the photograph tightly. He refrained from inquiring. There was no necessity for him to do so. I placed it in his hands. He gazed at it intently for what felt like an eternity, excessively lengthy. "Where did you come across this?" he inquired. "By the door," I remarked. No message. I gently shook my head, a silent gesture of disbelief. He let out a sharp exhale through his nose. Furious. I find myself unperturbed. It feels as though someone is observing us, he remarked. My gaze fell upon him. Who is it? He paused before responding, his jaw clenched with tension. He cast his gaze toward the stairs. Could it be him? He inquired. Mark. He inclined his head in agreement. For a moment I paused. No, I replied. He perceives the world differently. He scarcely notices the groceries nestled within the fridge. Caleb carefully creased the photograph down the middle, not to conceal it, merely to experience the sensation of taking action. So who is it? I was unaware. One who resides nearby. A figure passing by. A camera we were blissfully unaware of. Yet beyond that, there was a profound significance in the fact that someone had taken the time to print the photo, to convey it, to utter naught. What instilled the deepest fear within me was that very thing. Caleb moved restlessly around the room. With one hand tucked casually in his pocket, the other swept through his hair in a moment of contemplation. I ought to take my leave, he remarked. I rose to my feet. Refrain. He ceased his restless wandering, gazed upon me. The one responsible for this seeks to instill fear within us, I remarked, desires our disintegration. Silence enveloped him. Yet the expression on his face conveyed his agreement. Yet dread had already seeped into the dwelling. Quiet, unremarkable, a mere whisper of existence lingering in the shadows of each space. That evening, I carefully placed the creased photograph into the depths of a drawer seldom disturbed, beneath a pile of aged receipts and outdated coupons. Yet I remained acutely aware of its presence. Nor did he. On a quiet Sunday morning, Caleb revealed to me his decision to leave. The house lay in silence, as it invariably did, following a lengthy week of pretense. Mark ventured out to procure mulch for the garden. His vision of productivity involved adorning the world with something both beautiful and ephemeral. As I stood at the kitchen sink, I found myself rinsing a mug that had remained untouched. Caleb entered a duffel bag casually draped over one shoulder. His movements unfolded with a deliberate slowness. Calculated, he remained standing. He averted his gaze initially. I believe the moment has come for me to leave, he remarked. The faucet was turned off. I reached for the nearest towel to dry my hands. My heart experienced a fleeting acute pang, yet my voice remained steady. Is it due to the photograph? Due to all that has transpired, he remarked. I rested my weight against the counter. The texture of the wood grain pressed against my back. This house no longer exudes a sense of safety, he remarked. My gaze was fixed upon him, calm and composed, merely fatigued. Does departing truly ensure safety? His gaze fell upon the floor. Then look at me. No, he replied. Yet remaining would shatter it. The words lingered in the air, suspended like a door left ajar. A fissure formed deep within me. Do you believe that leaving this place will simplify things? My voice quivered for the first time in weeks. Do you believe that walking away erases what transpired? He advanced deliberately and with measured grace. I believe that if I remain, we will both forfeit our true selves. I gently shook my head, a subtle gesture of disbelief. That has already slipped away from me. He extended his hand, brushing against the edge of the counter, but not against me, as though he were anchoring himself. You have not, he remarked. You have discovered something. And so did I. I glided by him, feigning an interest in straightening the table. I adjusted a napkin that was perfectly fine as it was. You mentioned I felt like home, I murmured softly. You continue to. So what prompts your departure? He let out a breath. Home should remain a sanctuary untouched by the flames of fleeting comfort. I pivoted. He appeared utterly drained, not due to a deficit of slumber, but rather from restraining all the words he longed to express. A primal urge to scream welled up within me, to implore, to hurl an object at the wall, relishing the sound of its shattering demise. Yet I refrained. I remained motionless. At times, silence becomes the loudest cry that resonates within the hearts of those who listen. Silence enveloped us for what felt like an eternity. With a deliberate movement, I advanced nearer, not in despair, in the realm of comprehension. He spread his arms wide. I ventured into them. Our embrace lingered in silence. Proceed with caution, lacking fervor. There is no immediate need for action, simply authentic. His chin gently settled atop my head. My arms encircled his waist. We embraced as if we were two souls, acutely aware that time was slipping away an unstoppable force. The passage of time eludes my memory as we lingered in that moment. Yet in that moment of release, our gazes did not meet immediately. He grasped his bag with a deliberate motion, modified the strap. I refuse to say farewell, he declared. This doesn't seem to be the conclusion. I inclined my head in agreement. Words eluded me as my throat constricted, rendering me silent. He advanced toward the door. I opened it, remained in the frame for a moment longer than intended, and just like that, he vanished. In the solitude of the kitchen, I found myself alone. Soap bubbles clung to the rim of the mug resting in the sink. The wind had begun to stir once more outside, yet within a profound silence enveloped the space. 3 days slipped by since Caleb's departure. The house endeavored to reclaim its former cadence, or so it seemed. Mark pressed on, seemingly unaffected by the shift around him. He remarked on the weather, inquired whether I had checked the mail, and mentioned that we were in need of additional light bulbs. I acknowledged with subtle nods at the appropriate moments, offered a smile when the moment called for it. I transformed back into the woman I once was, or made an attempt to. Yet my body no longer navigated through space with the same grace. My hands no longer arranged the laundry in the same way. The world no longer appeared before my eyes with the same hue. Caleb had vanished, yet not entirely gone. The fragrance of him still hung in the air of the guest room. The towel neatly folded rested upon the chair he had vacated. The book, half read, remains face down beside the bed. I left everything just as it was. On the 4th afternoon, I found myself in the garden, kneeling beside the tomato plants. On that day, the sun radiated a gentle warmth. A gentle breeze whispers through the air. The earth retained a lingering moisture from the gentle caress of the morning dew. The sound of the gate creaking open echoed behind me. I rose, clearing the soil from my knees. Initially, she was unrecognizable to me. Years had slipped by. The passage of time had gently smoothed her features, yet her essence remained undiminished. The mother of Caleb by birth. Our bond had always been distant, civil indeed, courteous when necessary. Yet she had consistently maintained a certain distance, a silent watcher, never entirely placing her faith in a world that had taken her son and entrusted him to another's care. She approached me with a deliberate slowness, her heels sinking into the lush green grass beneath her. "I won't linger," she remarked, pausing a few paces distant. I remained silent, paused. She cast a fleeting look at the garden bed. Then it returned to me. "I am aware of the events that have transpired," she remarked. My throat constricted. "Did he share that with you?" She gently shook her head, a subtle gesture that spoke volumes. There was no obligation on his part. A gentle breeze changed its course ever so slightly. I sensed it in the fabric of my skirt, in the rustling leaves of the trees that stood sentinel behind us. She pressed on her tone, steady and composed. Steadfast. I understand my son. I can sense the shift in his gaze. As he strides, there's a sense that he bears a weight far beyond his years. 3 days have passed since I last laid eyes on him, for a span of 10 minutes, and I beheld all that was necessary. I took a deep breath, yet I remained silent. Her gaze fell to the ground. She plucked a tiny blade of grass from her heel. "Do you believe I arrived here to shout?" she inquired. "Or perhaps I shall cast a curse upon you." However, I did not. I gazed at her in that moment completely. Her face bore no trace of anger, no blame, exclusively clarity. "I have something to share with you," she remarked, "and then I shall take my leave." I lingered in anticipation. She advanced nearly within grasp. "Do not confuse silence with security," she remarked. "All things come at a cost." Her words lingered in the atmosphere, outlasting her very presence. She pivoted, strolled back toward the gate. She closed it softly behind her. I lingered in that spot for what felt like an eternity. The tomato plants danced gently in the breeze, and it dawned on me she had been aware long before I ever was. Caleb had vanished. No note was found, no forwarding address provided. There are no guarantees, only the silence he abandoned, dense and resonant, akin to a fog that stubbornly lingered. The days started to meld into one another once more. The mornings seeped into the afternoons, and the afternoons faded into evenings, all devoid of any notable occurrence. I glided among them as if I were crafted from fragile crystal, clear as glass, thoughtful, delicate. The photograph, the one that had been quietly slipped beneath our door, now resided between the pages of a book I had yet to open. I found myself bearing it along unwittingly, inserted it between chapters akin to a bookmark for a version of myself I struggled to reconnect with. His emails lingered untouched in the depths of my inbox. 2 individuals. One stood diminutive, merely a phrase, "I'm okay." The alternative more extended, yet I found myself unable to summon the courage to unveil it. Not at this moment. Certain things become formless when expressed through language. Certain elements must remain in a state of suspension to preserve their authenticity. The residence exuded a sense of cleanliness, excessively pristine. I scrubbed the counters as if they had committed the ultimate betrayal. I meticulously vacuumed rooms that were devoid of dust. I shifted the towels around only to return them to their original places. Order emerged as the sole semblance of control remaining in my grasp. Mark held his ground with unwavering resolve. He discussed the prospect of refinancing the mortgage, inquired whether I was interested in exploring beach rentals for a late summer getaway. As he sliced through the vegetables, laughter danced in the air, each chop accompanied by a playful quip. Found humor in the stories unfolding on the news. His universe remained intact. He remained oblivious to the moment I began to style my hair in a new way. As I embarked on the journey of forgoing lunch. As I lingered on the porch, my gaze lost in the void for what felt like an eternity. He possessed a gentle kindness, faithful, unsurprising, oblivious to it all. He assumed my silence stemmed from fatigue. My silence conveyed tranquility. In that moment, my smile was genuine. At times I pondered the duration one could coexist in the same dwelling with another, yet remain blind to their essence. At other moments, I found myself questioning whether that was indeed the fate I had crafted for my own being. I started to see reflections of her, the woman I once was, in the glass. Not always with clarity, merely musings at the brink of dawn's embrace. The contour of my jaw reflected in the bathroom mirror. The gentle tenderness that lingers at the edges of my gaze. The subtle inclination of my head in the absence of an audience. She felt no sorrow, not any longer. She had opened her eyes to the world around her, not in the manner that others imply when they claim to have transformed, yet in that hushed, irrevocable manner that follows the experience of emotions that linger beyond the reach of forgetfulness. On a quiet afternoon, I found myself gazing into the mirror in our bedroom. I gazed at my reflection for an extended moment. My intention was not to seek out beauty, or the passage of time, or perhaps a sense of absence. I sought to uncover the essence of truth, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I truly did. I encountered a woman who seemed to have slipped through the very fabric of visibility. It was then that I became aware, then transformed. I witnessed a woman who had ventured into flames not to be consumed, but to experience warmth once more. I held no hatred for her. I chose not to extend my forgiveness to her. Yet I grasped her essence, and that sufficed. This was never solely about him. It doesn't concern Caleb. It's not even concerning Mark. The focus was on me, on the matter of my existence fading from memory, contemplating the art of navigating a marriage with a quiet presence, mastering the delicate balance of being unobtrusive yet resilient, about silencing my emotions to the point where the sound of my own breath faded into oblivion. And then a gaze fell upon me, not by my hand, upon me, not driven by desire, not with sympathy, simply by being there. It's curious the extent of its power, to be acknowledged, truly observed, before you can catch a glimpse of your own reflection once more. People often discuss betrayal as if it is solely a tangible act, a gentle brush of lips, a falsehood, a shattered promise. Yet there are moments when betrayal reveals itself as truth arriving after the appointed hour. My intentions were never to cause pain to anyone, yet I had already begun to fade away before he made his entrance. Loneliness often whispers softly. It refrains from crashing against walls or shattering dishes. At times, it quietly attends to the task of folding laundry. At times, it remains on a couch that has grown distant from the warmth of companionship. At times, it dons the same garment each dawn, losing sight of the sensation of being selected. Mark did not let me down. Not completely. I did not let him down either. We simply ceased to extend our hands toward one another. Silently, slowly, but surely. The manner in which grass ceases to flourish in areas devoid of sunlight. What about love? Love does not always fade away in a blaze of chaos. Often it fades away quietly, with a heavy breath, in the manner that one hand retreats rather than advances. In this realm, one finds no antagonists lurking in the shadows, merely individuals, endeavoring, gone, devoid of sensation. I find myself reflecting on that frequently these days. The peril lay not in experiencing something unfamiliar. The peril lay in the facade of indifference, in the act of denying my need to experience any emotion whatsoever. So if someone ever gazes at you, truly gazes, and it stirs something within you that you believed had long been entombed. Perhaps that isn't the inception of something taboo. Perhaps this marks the conclusion of all facades. Perhaps, just perhaps, this narrative caused you to reflect, caused your breaths to deepen and slow, evoked memories of someone long overlooked, or perhaps a soul who has overlooked your presence. If it did rest, assured you are not alone. If you seek more tales of this nature-subtle narratives that articulate the unspoken fears we often harbor, then journey alongside me. Join us. Proceed. Pass this along to someone who may be cloaked in their own quietude, for the simple reason that the truth exists. We find ourselves in a state of anticipation, longing for that moment when someone will come and gently rattle the door of our tranquility and utter, "I perceive your presence."